Well, if you understand the nature of money, you'll realise that the balance of scales have already been tipped in the favour of banks, because they get to create money, and essentially that leads to large disparities within our society, and it creates a lot of other effects with the amount of money in circulation, and the very nature of it drive a whole bunch of other issues like the environment, population, resource consumption, a whole bunch of other issues stem out of that, in my opinion. Well, I'm going to start with the fact, and that is that money has had three main forms in history. Asset money, which is gold or silver, or bags of wheat or rice or salt or peppercorns, anything. Can literally be anything that has use or value. And then there's been debt-based money systems, and then debt-free money systems, or interest-bearing or non-interest-bearing is another way to think of it. And to explain the difference between those two, I'm going to use an analogy, and it's like a little bit of a story. So let's pretend that you and me and another individual were all in a little babysitter circle. We all had one child each, and occasionally I need you to take care of my child and vice versa. So to facilitate this exchange of labour of babysitting services, what happens is we can issue ourselves tokens or money, and maybe we all issue ourselves $10 each, and maybe you produce more babysitting than you consume, and you end up with more money, say $12, and maybe I'll consume more babysitting than I produce, and I end up with less money, and that makes perfect sense. Now that's one system, or a debt-free or interest-free money system, as opposed to a debt-based money system where money is lent into existence. So let's pretend a banker comes along and he says, you guys, you don't have the right colour ink, you don't have the correct style of paper, in fact only I've got the right type of printer, and only I should get to create money. And he's a great salesman, and we all go, yeah, you're so right, we want to do this. He goes, I'm going to lend you guys $10 each at just 10% interest. And we're blown away, we're sold on this idea. So we all borrow $10 off him. Let's say over a year, we all break even, and at the end of the year, he says, can I have my interest first? Can I have the 10% of $10? So we all give him $1, right? We all give him $1 our interest. Now we have $9 in our hand. And he says, great, now can I have the original $10 I lent you? But how can we pay? And if we were to attempt to pay, there would be no money in circulation and still more debt. So the question is, which system would you prefer to live in, and which system do you think we live in now? Now that kind of brings up another issue about how money is created in our current system. What you'll find is all the banks practice fractional reserve banking. So what this does is it allows them to lend out 90% of their deposits. So if I was to drop $1,000 on the bank at Commonwealth Bank, on the desk at Commonwealth, they'll loan out 90% or $900. Somebody, say yourself, would take that $900 as a loan and eventually spend it, or it'll end up at the Westpac Bank in their account. And undoubtedly they'll loan out 90% of that, another $810. And as this cycles on and on, all the banks count the original amount on their books. So they still count 1,000, they still count 900 and 810, and each one of those steps adds up to a tenfold increase. Sorry, the entire steps adds up to a tenfold increase in money supply. So they turn $1,000 into $10,000 by loaning it on and onto itself over and over again. And this is literally creating something out of nothing, and hence why you have a collapse in debt when that happens. Well, if you want to take it as the government would say it, you could say that the Reserve Bank gets to create, let's say, the original amount. Now, how do they get to create money? Well, I called them up and I said, all the money is lent into existence, it's debt. I can't pay for any of my debts because you can't pay a debt with a debt. Can't pay a bill with a bill or a liability with a liability. So I'm going to send my bills to you. And the RBA was very quick to deny this. They said, no, Simon, when the money is in your hands, it's an asset. And when we issue it, it's a liability. And all banks like to balance their books with assets and liabilities, balancing out to zero. So I said, you like to balance your books? And they're like, yes, we do with every transaction, because we're a bank. I said, fantastic. So what are the assets that you hold that back the liabilities? It's the cash that's circulating around. And they said to me, well, we hold other governments' currencies, and we hold bonds, including Australian government bonds. I said, okay, interesting. I said, Australian government bonds, that means they're an asset in your hand, and they're like, correct, and a liability to Treasury. And they're like, that is correct. I said, thank you, have a nice day. Called up Treasury. Call up the Australian Office of Financial Management. They record all their calls, so do them the same courtesy. And I spoke to a gentleman there, and it took me a little bit of time to get it out of him. But I said, you guys are issuing liabilities into the market called bonds. And he's like, correct. I said, what's the asset or surety that you hold that backs the bond? And he said, you won't find it written down anywhere. It's the government's ability to tax. Now this sounds really plain, it's odd, it doesn't sound like anything new. But I sat back and I thought for a couple of days, and I thought, these buildings, they only come into existence through labour. Same with a car, or a path, or anything of use or value. The minerals might come out of the ground, but while they're in the ground, they have no use. And if they have no use or value, then the only thing of value in the economy is labour. See, to make the building, you've got to dig the minerals out of the ground, and then they'll gain value. So it's the labour that you put in that gives things value. And ultimately, the only thing of value in the entire economy is labour, right? And what is the government bonded? The only thing of value, labour. That means your labour serves the bond, which makes you a bond servant. And in other times in history, that's been known as peonage, serfdom, or slavery. That's why I occupy, baby. Yeah. So what happens is, the bank never really says I want the interest and then I want the principal, because they'll collapse the whole system. So what they do is they continually loan more money in. So maybe at the end of the year, they might ask for the interest, and then they'll loan us more money, so we still have the same amount of money in circulation, or possibly even more. When there's more money comparative to goods and services, you have inflation. So what you'll find is, in this little system, you'll find that our money has exponential growth in it. So what does this mean? It means the total amount of money in the economy doubles every 5 years in Australia, and for most other first world nations, it's my understanding. So what it does is they double the amount of money, regardless of what we're producing or the goods and services available in the economy. And this leads to inflation and all sorts of things. And when you have a doubling period, you have what's called an exponential curve, which is basically just a hockey stick. It's a right angle depending on how far you zoom out. So what this does is it's runaway inflation or hyperinflation, like in Zimbabwe or Weimar Germany. Now, if they choose not to print more money, what will happen is people will default on loans because they can't pay them. There's never enough money in the system to pay the debt. There's always more debt than money. If they stop creating money, you have a debt default or debt deflation, and it shrinks the economy because people can't pay back loans, and they effectively go bad. And this shrinks the amount of money, just like in the Great Depression. They had debt deflation to about 33-35% around there. Well, their timing was interesting. Obviously it was the start of the weekend before the Queen came to town, and I don't think the Queen likes to see more than 25 people gathering together in case they have a list of demands. She might get a little bit nervous. So I think that was part of it. On the other hand, I don't think they like any type of, or any group of people getting together and talking about really biting issues, which are indictments effectively on the political landscape, because they've, in my opinion, politicians have really lost the plot. They're not in touch at all, and they're either completely corrupt or totally inept. Take your pick. Because if you're in government and you don't know where money comes from, you're in all sorts of trouble. One of the pollies came down and had a chat, and I asked him where money comes from. He had no idea. Now, was it a pretense? I'm not sure. Was he just feigning ignorance? I don't know. But I would say it's either way, it's dangerous. I'm not sure what's more dangerous, corruption or ineptness. Take your pick. I was busy, I was just running around. Police didn't touch me, but I certainly gave them an earful. Obviously the police don't know the law. They don't uphold it, they just follow instructions. I think people wearing brown shirts 70 odd years back 80 odd years back were doing the same thing. They were just following orders. Don't question it, just do it. I would say, if you realise what's wrong in the world, what are you waiting for? And if you don't realise what's wrong in the world, please go and do some research. You can start on almost any field. You'll realise it's horribly wrong, and our system is somewhat broken, to say the least.